Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be doing a book and a movie review for The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. So I read this book last month, but I thought I would do the review now because there is some like mysteriousness, there's some darkness, there's some tension, and it does sort of give me like fall vibes, sort of like a little bit spooky season, even though it's not like a horror or a thriller or anything. It's just there's a eerie atmosphere within the book that I think would lend itself well to reading Drawn the spooky season. It's a weird one because I didn't particularly like the book, but I still think it's objectively good, and one that I would recommend to lots of people to read. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think that's maybe a little bit generous. If I was going on enjoyment alone, then maybe like a 3 or 3.5, but I think what it does is quite good, and there is some redeeming qualities, and I just think overall it is a decent read. So The Wonder follows the main character of Elizabeth, or Lib, Wright, and she is a Nightingale trained nurse, and she gets the opportunity to go to rural Victorian era Ireland for a couple of weeks to basically care for a girl. That's what she's told. But then when she gets there, it isn't exactly as she seems, the task in hand, and her along with a nurse trained nun are there to watch this girl called Anna O'Donnell, who has apparently not eaten for 4 months, I believe it was, or 4 weeks. I'm not too sure about that, but it's a very long time, and they're basically there to watch her and make sure she doesn't eat, or not necessarily to make sure she doesn't eat, but just to see what's going on. And Anna's family and like the whole like little rural town, and that she is surviving by divine intervention, and this is the work of like God. But Lib isn't so keen to take this approach or reasoning, and what ensues over the watch over like a couple days is quite a tense situation where these two characters are getting to know each other, and there's like talk about their past, and Donoghue creates a lot of tension between them. And at its core, the book is the slow murder, in a sense, of a child in plain view, and yeah, that's what I say sort of the plot, but that is it. What I think is done best, and what I think is the main like crux of The Wonder, is this sort of like butt heading and disagreement between two different sides of a coin, in a sense. The main one being between religion and science, because the watch, and hence the book, stands on the balance of whether or not Anna is surviving by divine intervention, or if it is a hoax after all. And there is this like constant like it's one or the other, it's one or the other, and that I think is explored quite well. Also additionally, is this sort of like difference in religion, because nowadays we'd probably call Lib an atheist, and she does share her religious ideals, but she is also a representative of England within Ireland and the Irish people in the book, and how like in England at the time there was predominantly Anglican and Irish, and Ireland was Catholic. So there's this difference between the like Christian denominations, but also just the general God versus like science, which I think is explored very well. Also with the help of another character, the Dublin journalist William Byrne, there is a rural versus urban sort of exploration, because Ireland, unlike a lot of other Western countries during the time, had a big population decrease, because it's not long after the potato famine, and lots of people dying, and also loads moving away to like America and the New World, and how the rural communities did take the brunt force of this. And although there isn't that big differences between the rural locations and the urban locations within the country, there is still some, and Burns' character does add to this conversation, and I did quite like what he added to it. And I guess a final note of the disagreements is between women and men, and Donahue does a great job at exploring like medicine and like women's place in society at the time, and how their opinions weren't valued as highly or at all, even though they were the ones that were making like the most sense in the book. I'm talking about Lib here, in comparison to the other professionals that she is speaking with and interacting with. I think the prose and the writing is sort of my least favorite part of the book. It is definitely good, don't get me wrong. It's eerie and it's well written, and it everything just slots together. It's very like sophisticated, but I just think it goes on and there's too much repetition, and the pacing, whilst it's consistent, is very, very slow, and there's just quite a lot of times where the same like conversation or situation or event keeps happening quite a lot and is explored multiple times, and this definitely adds to the eerie atmosphere, but it does sort of become a slog to get through at times as well, because you just want to move on. But overall, I think it is definitely well written. It's just a bit too much, or maybe a bit overwritten. I did really quite like the characters. There is like nuance to them in various aspects. Lib is definitely the most explored, and she is a very complex woman. I did quite like her character and what she brought to it, especially with her like views and ideals, and how she was sort of isolated within the community and the family. I would also say the mystery elements were quite good, and for a large chunk of the book I was really like dumbfounded and just like, what is actually going on here? Like, I do not know, like I want to know, and that's sort of why I kept on reading. And I was just like, I'm shook if like I cannot piece things together. And whilst some people in like reviews and stuff, they did see the main like twist coming, I personally didn't. And whilst the book doesn't necessarily hang on the balance of the twists, I did still feel a bit like, oh, okay, like taken aback when I got to them, which I did quite like. So that is my end sort of the review of the book. I didn't particularly like it, but it is good objectively, I think. And I think Donahue does a great job at just connecting with the reader and making them want to read on, and I am for sure gonna explore more of her works. I think this maybe wasn't the best for me, but definitely some of her other ones do interest me more so. Not that long ago, I watched a film adaptation on Netflix. Just put the poster there. I quite like this film. It's once again like the book. It's slow and a little quite dreary, and quite a lot of the same things happening again. It's a very good adaptation, I think, and it definitely gets this sort of like eerie atmosphere done right. There is maybe not so much tension because you're physically continuously seeing what's going on, whereas when you're reading it, you just sort of more have to imagine things. And there was a certain bit with Lib and William Byrne quite near the end, about the 75%ish mark, I think, that wasn't actually in the film adaptation. I won't say what it was because it would be a spoiler, but that bit I think was quite a good turning point in the book, and that wasn't in the film. But I kind of see why, because it, like, you're constantly seeing Anna, so the same thing can't really come across onto screen. But I did like it. I don't really review films. I don't know, I think it was, I would probably say it's a good would recommend the film. I probably would still read the book over it. I did think I preferred the book. It just had a bit more of that tension. But overall, both were good, not great, but I would still recommend them, and hopefully other people can enjoy them a lot more than I did. So that is the end of today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I do think this is a good book to read for the upcoming spooky season with the eeriness. But anyhow, I hope you have a nice morning, evening, night, wherever you are in the world, and I shall see you very soon. Bye!